story written by Moonrise Romance Library. Chapter 1, A Promise Kept. The smell of blood filled the birthing chamber, thick, metallic, wrong. Aldrich's hands trembled as he gripped his mate's, her skin already cooling beneath his touch. The midwives worked frantically around them, their panicked whispers a dull roar against the singular sound of his world collapsing. Aldrich, her voice was barely a breath, pulling his gaze to her face. Beautiful even now, especially now. Listen to me. Don't, the word came out broken. Don't say goodbye. She smiled, and it shattered something deep in his chest. From somewhere in the chaos, a newborn's cry pierced the air, strong, healthy, alive. Everything she would never be. Her fingers tightened weakly around his. Take good care of our son. Then she was gone. The light in her eyes dimmed like a candle snuffed by an unseen hand, and Aldrich felt the bond between them snap so violently he thought his ribs would cave inward. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. His wolf howled inside him, a keening wail that had no end. The midwife pressed a small, squirming bundle into his arms. Your Majesty, the prince. He looked down, tiny fists, dark wisps of hair, eyes that hadn't yet opened to see the world that had already taken his mother from him. Take good care of our son. Aldrich held his child against his chest and made a promise to the woman who would never hear it. I will. I swear it. 3 years carved themselves into Aldrich's bones like notches on a blade. He learned to soothe nightmares at midnight, to decipher the difference between hungry cries and lonely ones. He sat through council meetings with spit up on his shoulder and made treaty decisions while mentally cataloging which foods Fridolf would actually eat. The court whispered, some with pity, others with judgment. An alpha king should remarry. An heir needed a mother. But Fridolf needed him, and that was enough. Until it wasn't. Aldrich stood in the corridor outside the nursery, watching through the partially open door. Fridolf sat on a woven rug, his little hands clutching a carved wooden wolf. Around him, 3 palace maids rotated through their duties, each one handpicked, each one tested. Maid Iris spoke in high, chirping tones that made Fridolf's face scrunch with confusion. Maid Bretta moved too quickly, her efficiency startling the boy into silence. But when Lucia knelt beside him, something shifted. She didn't coo or fuss. She simply sat, her presence calm as still water. Fridolf looked up at her, and his entire face transformed. The wooden wolf tumbled from his grip as he crawled into her lap, tucking his head beneath her chin like he'd found the safest place in the world. Lucia's arms came around him without hesitation, and she hummed, low, melodic, ancient. A song Aldrich didn't recognize but felt in his marrow. Fridolf's eyes drifted closed. His small body relaxed completely, trusting in a way that made Aldrich's throat tighten. Did you see that? Bretta whispered beside him, startling him. He hadn't heard her approach. She has a gift with him, Your Majesty. It's almost like he knows her. Aldrich nodded slowly, unable to tear his gaze away. How long has she been here? 2 moons, sire, came from the northern pack. Quiet girl, keeps to herself mostly. And her wolf. Bretta hesitated. That's the strange thing, Your Majesty. No one's seen it. She never shifts during pack runs. Always has some excuse, tired, unwell, duties to attend. The other maids talk. Let them talk. Aldrich's voice came out rougher than he intended. If Fridolf is happy, that's all that matters. But the question lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. What kind of wolf hid herself so thoroughly? The council chamber felt colder than usual. Aldrich sat at the head of the table, 6 pairs of eyes fixed on him with varying degrees of concern and expectation. 3 years is long enough, Your Majesty. Elder Torrens' voice carried the weight of tradition. The pack needs stability. The prince needs a mother. He has me. With respect, sire, you cannot be both. Another councilman leaned forward. The boy is growing. He'll need guidance, structure, a woman's touch. He has that. Aldrich thought of Lucia's gentle hands, the way Fridolf bloomed under her care. A maid's touch is not the same as a mother's. Torrens' words were careful but pointed. You've mourned well and honorably, but the throne requires an heir and a Luna. Take a chosen mate. Give the prince what he deserves. Aldrich's jaw tightened. The faces around the table blurred slightly, and for a moment all he could see was her, his true mate, her final breath, her final request. Take good care of our son. Giving Fridolf a mother wasn't abandoning that promise. It was fulfilling it. I'll consider it, he said finally. The council seemed to exhale as one. That night, Aldrich found himself in the nursery again. Fridolf slept soundly, one hand curled around the wooden wolf, the other stretched toward the empty space beside him. Even in sleep, the boy reached for something he'd never known. Aldrich knelt beside the small bed, brushing dark hair from his son's forehead. 3 years old, growing faster than seemed possible. Soon he'd ask questions Aldrich didn't know how to answer. Why don't I have a mother like the other pups? Where did she go? Will she come back? I'm trying, Aldrich whispered. I'm trying to do what she asked. Fridolf stirred but didn't wake. His lips curved slightly, caught in some pleasant dream. Tomorrow, Aldrich would make his decision. Tomorrow, he would choose a mate, not for himself, but for the child who deserved a complete family. For the promise he'd made to a woman whose absence still carved holes in his chest. He pressed a kiss to Fridolf's temple and stood. As he turned to leave, his gaze caught on the window. Outside, the moon hung full and bright, casting silver across the palace grounds. Somewhere in the servants' quarters, Lucia was likely preparing for sleep. Did she ever wonder why the prince clung to her so fiercely? Did she feel the same strange rightness Aldrich had witnessed in that quiet moment between them? He shook his head. It didn't matter. She was a maid. Capable, yes. Trusted, certainly. But the pack needed a Luna of status, education, breeding. Still, as he walked the empty corridors back to his own cold chambers, one thought refused to leave him. Fridolf had never smiled at anyone the way he smiled at Lucia. Chapter 2, The Perfect Luna. The announcement came 3 days later in the Grand Hall, before the entire court. Aldrich stood at the dais, Fridolf fidgeting in the arms of maid Bretta near the side entrance, and spoke the words that would reshape their lives. I have chosen Flora, daughter of Merchant Lord Davrin of the Eastern Ridge Pack, to be my mate and Luna of this realm. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, some approving, others surprised. Flora's name carried weight. Her father's trade routes stretched across 3 territories, and Flora herself had been educated in pack law under some of the finest minds in the region. Beautiful, poised, well-connected. On parchment, she was flawless. Elder Torin rose, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. A wise choice, Your Majesty. The Union will strengthen our alliances and provide the stability our pack requires. The other council members nodded in agreement, their relief palpable. Aldrich forced his shoulders to relax, ignoring the hollow feeling that had taken root in his chest since making the decision. Lady Flora will arrive within the fortnight for the traditional 3-week stay before our union is formalized. Applause echoed through the hall. Aldrich's gaze drifted to where Fridolf sat, the boy's dark eyes wide and uncertain. Even from across the room, Aldrich could see the confusion on his son's face. It's for you, he wanted to say. All of this is for you. But the words stayed locked behind his teeth. Flora arrived on a clear morning, her carriage drawn by 4 black horses that gleamed like polished stone. Aldrich waited at the palace entrance, the council flanking him, Fridolf's small hand tucked firmly in his own. When she stepped down, even Aldrich had to admit she was stunning. Hair like spun copper cascaded over her shoulders, and her emerald dress brought out the unusual green of her eyes. She moved with the kind of grace that came from years of training, every gesture deliberate, every smile perfectly measured. Your Majesty, she dipped into a curtsy so deep it bordered on theatrical. It is an honor. Lady Flora, Aldrich inclined his head. Welcome to the palace. I trust your journey was pleasant. Long but worthwhile. Her gaze slid past him to the councilmen, and her smile widened. I look forward to serving this pack with all that I am. The councilmen practically preened. Elder Torin stepped forward, already launching into pleasantries about trade agreements and political advantages. Flora responded with intelligent commentary, her knowledge of pack law evident in every word. Aldrich felt Fridolf's grip tighten on his hand. He looked down. His son had gone rigid, his face pale, his breathing shallow. "Fridolf," Aldrich crouched to the boy's level. "What's wrong?" Fridolf didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Flora with an intensity that seemed wrong for a child so young. His little chest rose and fell too quickly. Flora turned then, her attention finally landing on the prince. Her smile didn't falter, but something flickered in her eyes, something brief and cold before warmth flooded back in. And this must be the young prince. She moved toward them, her skirts whispering against stone. "What a handsome boy you are." She reached out. Fridolf screamed. The sound tore through the courtyard like a blade. He wrenched away from Aldrich's hand and stumbled backward, his small body trembling violently. Tears streamed down his face as he continued to wail, his cries raw and primal. "Fridolf!" Aldrich lunged for him, but the boy twisted away, his screams intensifying. Flora's hand hung in the air, her expression frozen somewhere between shock and something darker. I didn't mean to frighten him. He's usually not like this." Aldrich scooped Fridolf into his arms, but the boy thrashed, his cries turning to sobs that shook his entire frame. "SHH, it's all right, you're safe." But Fridolf wouldn't calm. His small hands pushed against Aldrich's chest as if trying to escape, his eyes wild with terror. "Perhaps he's overwhelmed," Elder Torin offered, though his tone carried a hint of disapproval. "Children can be unpredictable." "Of course." Flora's voice was smooth again, her composure restored. "I understand completely. We'll have time to get acquainted." But as she smiled, Aldrich caught it. A tightness around her mouth, a flash of irritation in her eyes before she masked it. Fridolf buried his face in Aldrich's neck and sobbed like his heart was breaking. The first week passed in a dance of carefully maintained appearances. In public, Flora was everything Aldrich had been promised: charming, intelligent, graceful. She discussed trade routes with the council, offered thoughtful suggestions about pack management, and moved through the palace like she'd been born to rule it. But Aldrich began to notice the cracks. He found maid Iris in tears one afternoon, scrubbing the same spot on the floor over and over. "What happened?" Iris jumped, nearly dropping her brush. "Nothing, Your Majesty, I'm fine." "You're crying." She wiped her face quickly, leaving a streak of soap across her cheek. "Lady Flora wanted her chambers cleaned again. I'd already done them twice today, but she said they weren't good enough. That I was incompetent." Aldrich's jaw tightened. "I see." "It's nothing, truly. I'm sure she's just particular." But Iris's hands shook as she spoke. He found similar stories everywhere. Bretta mentioned Flora's sharp comments about the food being served too slowly. One of the younger maids whispered about being berated for a crooked pillow, always behind closed doors, always out of earshot of anyone who mattered. And then there was Fridolf. The boy refused to be in the same room as Flora. The moment she entered, he would cry or cling to whoever held him, his small body going tense. Aldrich tried everything: slow introductions, keeping distance, having Flora offer toys or sweets. Nothing worked. "He'll adjust," Flora said one evening as they dined alone. Her voice was light, but her fingers gripped her wine glass too tightly. "Children are resilient." "He's usually very friendly." Aldrich watched her carefully. "He's never reacted this way to anyone." "Perhaps he senses change and fears it." She set down her glass with a soft clink. "Or perhaps he's been indulged too much." The words landed like stones. "What do you mean?" Flora's smile was delicate, apologetic. "Forgive me. I only mean that he's young and has had you entirely to himself for 3 years. Sharing you with someone new must be difficult for him." It sounded reasonable, logical even, but something about the way she said it made Aldrich's wolf stir uneasily. That night, he stopped by the nursery to check on Fridolf. The boy was awake, sitting up in bed with the wooden wolf clutched to his chest. "Papa." "I'm here." Aldrich sat on the edge of the bed. "Bad dream." Fridolf shook his head. His dark eyes were too solemn for a child. Don't like her. I know, but she's going to be. Don't like her, Fridolf repeated, more insistent. His small hand grabbed Aldrich's sleeve. She's bad. Fridolf's. Want Lucia. The name hit Aldrich unexpectedly. He'd barely seen Lucia since Flora arrived. She'd been reassigned to different duties, kept away from the prince at Flora's polite but firm suggestion that too many caregivers would confuse the boy during this transition. Lucia is still here, Aldrich said softly. She hasn't gone anywhere. But even as he said it, he realized how long it had been since he'd seen his son truly smile. Fridolf's eyes filled with tears. Want Lucia, he whispered again, and the brokenness in his voice made Aldrich's chest ache. He pulled his son close, feeling the small body tremble against him. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the palace, Flora was settling into chambers that still smelled faintly of his dead mate's perfume. And for the first time since making his decision, Aldrich wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Chapter 3. Breaking the Boy. Flora found Aldrich in his study 2 mornings later, reviewing grain reports from the southern farms. She entered without knocking, her posture perfect, her expression carefully concerned. We need to discuss the prince. Aldrich looked up from the parchment. What about him? He's undisciplined. She moved closer, her skirts rustling. I've been observing, and frankly, I'm worried. An heir to the throne requires structure, order, proper training. You indulge him too much. The words pricked at something raw. He's 3 years old. Exactly. Flora's voice softened, turned almost pleading. These are the formative years, the foundation upon which his entire character will be built. Right now, he runs wild, sleeps when he pleases, eats what he wants. There's no discipline, no routine. Aldrich set down his quill. He's happy. He's coddled. The sharpness slipped through before she caught it, smoothing her tone again. Forgive me, but you've been both mother and father for so long, perhaps you've lost perspective. A firm hand now will save him from weakness later. Something in her logic resonated, however much Aldrich wanted to reject it. The council had said similar things in gentler terms, and Flora had been educated in these matters, raised among nobility, trained in leadership. What do you suggest? Triumph flashed across her face, gone so quickly he almost missed it. Let me draft a proper schedule. Meal times, lessons, rest periods, all structured appropriately for his age and station. He's 3, Aldrich repeated. Which is precisely when discipline should begin. Flora pulled a folded parchment from her sleeve, already prepared. I took the liberty, see for yourself. Aldrich scanned the document. Wake at dawn. Breakfast in silence to teach control. Morning lessons in letters and numbers. Afternoon instruction in proper behavior. Limited playtime, supervised and purposeful. Early bed with no stories unless earned through good conduct. It looked like a prison schedule. This is too rigid. This is necessary. Flora's hand touched his arm, light as a feather. Trust me, I know it seems harsh, but royal children require different upbringing. You want him to be strong, don't you? Capable, a leader this pack can respect. Aldrich thought of Fridolf's tears, his fear, his constant rejection of Flora. Maybe the boy did need more structure. Maybe Aldrich had been too lenient, too soft, too afraid of breaking the last piece of his mate he had left. 1 week, he heard himself say. We'll try it for 1 week. Flora's smile was radiant. You won't regret this. But he already did. The change was immediate and devastating. Fridolf woke screaming the first morning when Bretta pulled him from bed at dawn, instead of letting him sleep until the sun warmed his windows. He cried through breakfast, confused why he couldn't speak, why his favorite honey cakes were replaced with plain porridge. It's the new routine, little one, Bretta whispered, her own eyes wet. I'm sorry. The morning lessons were a nightmare. Fridolf was too young to understand letters, too restless to sit still. When he fidgeted, Flora, who insisted on supervising, would correct him with a sharp word. When he cried, she told him tears were weakness unbefitting a prince. By the 3rd day, the light had gone out of Fridolf's eyes. Lucia saw it happen from a distance, her heart fracturing with each passing hour. She'd been relegated to cleaning duties far from the nursery, but she found excuses to pass by, to catch glimpses of the boy who'd once lit up at the sight of her. Now he barely reacted to anything. He moved through his day like a shadow, his small shoulders hunched, his face empty. He stopped crying, stopped fighting, just stopped. On the 5th day, Lucia couldn't bear it anymore. She found Aldrich in the garden, staring at nothing. He looked older somehow, worn down by something invisible. "Your Majesty," her voice came out smaller than she intended. He turned, surprise crossing his features. "Lucia, I haven't seen you in days." "I've been reassigned." She twisted her hands together, fighting every instinct that told her to stay silent, stay invisible, stay in her place. "Your Majesty, I need to speak with you about Prince Fridolf." His expression shifted, guarded, defensive. "What about him?" "He's suffering." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "The routines, the schedules, the constant corrections. He's just a child. He was happy before, laughing, playing, exploring. Now he's—" She struggled to find the right word. "Broken." Aldrich's jaw tightened. Lady Flora believes structure is important for his development. "Structure, yes, but not cruelty." Lucia stepped closer, desperate to make him see. "He's 3 years old. He needs love, patience, gentle guidance, not to be treated like a soldier in training." "You overstep." "I know," her voice cracked. "I know I'm just a maid and I have no right to question your decisions, but I've cared for him since I arrived. I've seen him at his happiest and I'm watching him die inside. Please, Your Majesty, he doesn't need discipline. He needs his father." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Aldrich stared at her, and she watched something crumble behind his eyes. "She said he needed to be stronger." "He's already strong." Lucia's throat burned. "He lost his mother before he could know her. He's growing up without half of what makes a child whole, and still he smiles. Still he loves. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." Aldrich turned away, his shoulders rigid. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, "Thank you." "Your Majesty." "Leave me, please." Lucia curtsied and fled before the tears could fall. That evening, Aldrich burned the schedule. He found Fridolf in the nursery, sitting motionless on his bed, the wooden wolf abandoned in the corner. "Fridolf's." The boy looked up with empty eyes. Aldrich knelt and pulled his son into his arms. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Fridolf didn't respond, didn't cry, didn't react. He just sat there, limp and hollow. It took 3 days for the boy to cry again, another 2 before he smiled. But something had changed, a wariness that hadn't existed before, a fear of disappointing, of being too loud, too much, too himself. And when Flora asked him sweetly over dinner why he'd abandoned the schedule, Aldrich's answer was gentle but final. "He's my son. I'll raise him as I see fit." Her smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold. That night, she stood before the portrait of Aldrich's dead mate, beautiful, serene, forever young, and her fingers curled into fists. "These paintings," she said the next morning, "don't you think it's time to put them away?" Aldrich looked at her for a long moment. "No." "But surely." "No." Flora's jaw clenched. She dipped her head in acquiescence, but as she left, her smile was sharp as broken glass. Chapter 4. A Deadly Plan. Flora's request to visit her family came 10 days before the end of her palace stay. Aldrich granted it without hesitation, relief flooding through him at the prospect of a few days' peace. She left with smiles and promises to return quickly, but the moment her carriage disappeared beyond the gates, the entire palace seemed to exhale. Fridolf laughed that afternoon for the first time in weeks. Flora's childhood home sat nestled in the hills of the eastern ridge, all stone and timber and inherited wealth. Her parents welcomed her with enthusiasm, peppering her with questions about the king, the palace, the upcoming wedding. "He's everything we hoped for," Flora said over dinner, her smile practiced and perfect. "Generous, respected, powerful." Her mother beamed. "And the boy?" Flora's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The boy is adjusting. Children can be difficult, her father offered, but he'll come around once you're properly established as Luna. Flora forced herself to nod, to smile, to swallow the bitterness coating her tongue. They didn't understand, couldn't understand. The boy wasn't difficult, he was an obstacle. Every time Aldrich looked at Fridolf, his eyes softened in ways they never did for her. Every decision, every moment, every breath revolved around that child. And those paintings, those cursed paintings of a dead woman who still held more power over Aldrich than Flora ever would. She excused herself early, claiming exhaustion from travel. But sleep didn't come. She lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning darker with each passing hour. A knock on her door came just after midnight. "Flora," the voice was familiar, warm. "Are you awake?" Flora opened the door to find Celeste standing there, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes bright with mischief. They'd been friends since childhood, sharing secrets and dreams and ambitions that polite society would have deemed unseemly for young women. "I heard you were home." Celeste slipped inside, closing the door behind her. "Tell me everything. Is he handsome? Is the palace as grand as they say?" Flora moved to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. "It's all perfect and completely wrong." "What do you mean?" The words spilled out, bitter, raw, uncensored. The boy's constant presence, Aldrich's devotion to him above all else. The way every servant loved the brat, how even the council made allowances for him. The portraits of his dead mate haunting every corridor. The maid, that insignificant Omega maid, who somehow commanded more warmth from Fridolf than Flora could ever hope to achieve. And when I try to implement any structure, any control, Aldrich dismisses it. Flora's hands clenched the windowsill. That maid whispered in his ear, and he abandoned everything I'd planned. As if I'm the problem. As if I'm not the one who will be Luna. Celeste was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful, almost casual. "The boy is the real threat, you know." Flora turned. "What?" "Think about it." Celeste moved closer, her expression sharp with calculation. "You could be the perfect Luna, beloved by all, but your children will never inherit. They'll always be second. That boy, Fridolf, he's the heir. Your own sons will be nothing more than spares, forever in his shadow." The truth of it hit Flora like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on winning Aldrich's affection, on establishing her position, that she hadn't thought beyond the immediate future. But Celeste was right. Any children she bore would be second-born at best. Powerless. Irrelevant. Unless. "What are you suggesting?" Flora's voice came out barely above a whisper. Celeste's smile was slow, dangerous. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply observing that accidents happen. Children are fragile. Illness strikes without warning." She paused, letting the implication settle between them. "Especially when there's no cure." Flora's heart hammered against her ribs. "That's practical," Celeste finished. "You remove the obstacle, secure your position, and ensure your future children inherit what should rightfully be theirs. Aldrich is devoted to the boy now, yes, but grief fades. He'll need comfort, companionship, new heirs. And you'll be there, the perfect Luna, giving him everything he needs." It was madness, murder, unthinkable. And yet, Flora thought of Fridolf's rejection, Aldrich's gentle refusals, the way her carefully laid plans crumbled every time that child cried. She thought of spending her life in the shadow of a dead woman and her living son, always second, always less, always competing with ghosts and a boy who would grow to resent her. "How?" The word escaped before she could stop it. Celeste's eyes gleamed. "My cousin is an apothecary. He deals in unusual substances. There's a poison, rare, slow-acting. It mimics natural illness. Fever, weakness, gradual decline. By the time symptoms appear, it's too late. And the best part?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There's no known cure. Well, almost none." "Almost." "Legend says golden wolves can cure it, some ancient magic in their blood." Celeste laughed softly. "But golden wolves are myth. They don't exist. Haven't for centuries, if they ever did at all." Flora's mind raced. A slow poison, untreatable. The boy would sicken gradually, no suspicion, no blame, just a tragic illness that even the finest healers couldn't prevent. Aldrich would grieve, yes, but he'd already survived losing his mate. He was strong, he'd recover. And Flora would be there to help him through it. "I need to think," she said. Celeste nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course, but don't take too long. You return to the palace soon, don't you? These opportunities don't wait forever." She left as silently as she'd arrived, leaving Flora alone with thoughts that should have horrified her, but instead felt like salvation. 2 days later, Flora stood in a dimly lit apothecary, a small vial tucked into her sleeve. The liquid inside was clear as water, odorless, tasteless. Perfect. She returned to the palace with a week remaining before the wedding preparations would officially begin. Aldrich welcomed her back warmly, and even Fridolf seemed slightly less afraid, probably because her absence had reminded him what peace felt like. Flora smiled and played her role. Sweet, gracious, patient. She offered no complaints, no suggestions, no demands. She was the perfect guest, the perfect future Luna. And she waited. On the 5th day, she volunteered to take Fridolf his afternoon meal. The servant seemed surprised but pleased. Perhaps she was finally bonding with the boy. Aldrich encouraged it, hope flickering in his eyes. Flora carried the tray herself, climbing the stairs to the nursery where Fridolf played with wooden blocks. He looked up when she entered, wariness immediately tightening his small features. "I brought you something special," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Your favorite honey cakes." She set the tray down, and while Fridolf hesitated, she uncorked the vial with movements hidden by her skirts. 3 drops into the milk, colorless, tasteless, undetectable. "Go on," she urged gently, "before it gets cold." Fridolf's hunger won over his caution. He reached for a cake, took a bite, then drank deeply from the cup. Flora watched him with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Good boy," she murmured, and left him to his fate. Chapter 5. The Illness. Flora left on the 7th day with promises and smiles, her carriage laden with gifts from Aldrich, silks, jewels, tokens of a union that would never happen. She waved from the window as the wheels began to turn, and Aldrich waved back, Fridolf tucked against his side. The boy seemed quiet, subdued, but Flora was gone, and Aldrich attributed it to relief. He didn't notice the flush creeping across his son's cheeks. 3 days later, Fridolf wouldn't eat breakfast. He pushed away his porridge, his small face pale, his eyes glassy. "Not hungry, little one." Bretta pressed a hand to his forehead and frowned. "You're warm." "Just a fever," Aldrich said, trying to ignore the twist of unease in his gut. "Children get them all the time." But by evening, Fridolf was burning. His skin radiated heat, and his breathing came shallow and quick. Aldrich carried him to his chambers, laying him on the large bed where he could watch over him properly. "Fetch the healer," he ordered. The pack's healer arrived within the hour, an elderly woman named Marta who treated everything from battlefield wounds to birthing complications. She examined Fridolf thoroughly, her expression growing more troubled with each passing moment. "Well," Aldrich's voice was sharp with barely contained fear. "A fever, certainly, but the cause." She trailed off, her fingers gentle on Fridolf's pulse point. "I'll prepare a tonic, it should break by morning." It didn't. By the 4th day, Fridolf could barely keep his eyes open. He drifted in and out of consciousness, whimpering softly when the pain grew too much. His small body trembled with chills one moment and burned with fever the next. Marta returned with stronger medicines. Nothing worked. Aldrich sent for every healer within a day's ride. They came with their remedies and their theories, bad humors, spiritual imbalance, cursed air. They bled him, gave him herbs that made him vomit, wrapped him in cold cloths and then hot ones. Fridolf only grew weaker. "There's nothing physically wrong with him," one healer insisted after a thorough examination. "His organs are sound, his blood flows properly. Whatever ails him, it's not of the body." "Then what?" Aldrich's hands shook as he gripped the man's collar. "What is it?" "I don't know, Your Majesty. I'm sorry." Another healer suggested poison but couldn't identify which kind. If it is poison, it's nothing I've encountered, and by now, if it were lethal, he'd already be dead. But Fridolf wasn't dead. He was dying slowly, agonizingly, fatting a little more each day while Aldrich watched helplessly. The wedding invitations were prepared, ready to be sent. Aldrich burned them in his fireplace and penned a single message to Flora. "The wedding is postponed. My son is ill." Her response came quickly, full of concern and offers to return. He told her to stay with her family. He couldn't bear to look at her right now, couldn't explain the creeping suspicion that had begun to poison his thoughts. On the 8th day, Bretta came to him with trembling hands. "Your Majesty, I was cleaning Lady Flora's former chambers and She held out a small glass vial, nearly empty, a residue clinging to the bottom. "I found this behind the dresser. It must have rolled there and been forgotten." Aldrich took it, and the moment his fingers closed around the glass, Flora's scent hit him. Unmistakable, recent. His wolf snarled inside him, rage and grief twisting together into something murderous. "Leave me," he said, his voice barely human. Bretta fled. Aldrich uncorked the vial and sniffed. Nothing. No scent beyond Flora's. He tilted it, watching the clear residue catch the light. It could be anything. Perfume, medicine, something innocent. But he knew. Deep in his bones, in the part of him that was more wolf than man, he knew. She'd poisoned his son. He summoned Marta immediately, thrusting the vial into her hands. "Test this. Tell me what it is." She worked through the night. When she returned at dawn, her face was grave. "It's a poison, Your Majesty. Rare, very rare. I've only read of it in ancient texts." She set the vial down carefully, as if it might bite. "It's called Shadow Veil, slow-acting, designed to mimic natural illness. By the time symptoms appear, it's already deep in the blood." "And the cure?" His voice cracked. "There is none," she hesitated. "At least none that I know of. The texts mention that only—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Forgive me, it's folklore, not medicine." "Tell me." "They say only a golden wolf can cure Shadow Veil poisoning. Something in their essence, their life force. But Your Majesty, golden wolves are legend. They haven't existed for—" "How long does he have?" The question hung in the air, like an executioner's blade. "Days," Marta whispered. "Maybe a week if he's strong." Aldrich looked at the vial, at the evidence of Flora's betrayal, and felt something break inside him. He could accuse her, drag her back in chains, execute her for attempted murder of the heir. But Flora's father commanded trade routes that fed half the region. Her pack was allied with 3 others. Accusing her without absolute proof, without witnesses, without confession, would be seen as an insult, a provocation. War. And while packs fought and bled over pride and politics, Fridolf would die anyway. Aldrich returned to his chambers where his son lay dying. He climbed onto the bed and gathered Fridolf's small, fevered body into his arms. "I'm here," he whispered against the boy's sweat-dampened hair. "Papa's here, I won't leave you." Fridolf's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Hurts," he whimpered. I know, little one. I'm so sorry." "Want, Lucia." The name pierced Aldrich's heart. Even now, delirious with fever, Fridolf reached for the one person who'd shown him pure, uncomplicated love. "I'll get her," Aldrich promised. "I'll get her right now." He called for Lucia, and she came running, still in her cleaning apron, her face pale with worry. When she saw Fridolf, a sob escaped her. "Oh gods, what happened?" "Sit with him," Aldrich said. "Please, he's been asking for you." Lucia climbed onto the bed without hesitation, cradling Fridolf against her chest. The boy's breathing evened slightly, his whimpers quieting. And Aldrich stood at the window, staring out at a kingdom he would burn to ash if it meant saving his son. But even a king couldn't fight poison with power. All he could do was watch, and wait, and pray to gods he'd stopped believing in the day his mate died. Chapter 6, Lucia's Sacrifice. Lucia didn't leave Fridolf's side for 2 days. She sat with him through fevered nightmares and moments of terrible stillness, when his breathing grew so shallow she had to press her ear to his chest to hear his heartbeat. Aldrich would collapse into sleep for brief hours, and when he woke, she was always there, humming soft songs, wiping the boy's face with cool cloths, whispering promises she had no right to make. "You're going to be fine, sweet one. You're strong, so strong." But on the third night, as Lucia watched Fridolf's small chest rise and fall with labored breaths, something in her memory stirred. The pattern of his fever, high, then low, then high again. The way his skin had taken on a grayish pallor beneath the flush. The tremors that seized him without warning. She'd seen this before. Years ago, when she was barely more than a child herself, her mother had treated a merchant who'd been poisoned by a rival. Lucia remembered sneaking into the healing room, watching her mother work with frantic precision, muttering about rare toxins and impossible cures. The merchant had died, but her mother had known what killed him. Lucia's hands stilled on Fridolf's forehead. Her heart began to race. If this was the same poison, if she was right, then there might be records, notes, something her mother had kept. She looked at Aldrich, who sat slumped in a chair by the window, his face haggard with exhaustion and grief. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "I need to clean Lady Flora's former chambers." He didn't even look up. "Now." "It's been neglected. I should." "Do what you need to do." Lucia slipped from the room, her pulse thundering in her ears. She moved through the corridors like a ghost, reaching Flora's chambers just as the moon rose outside the windows. The room smelled stale, unused. Lucia began searching methodically, drawers, wardrobes beneath the bed. Behind the dresser, her fingers found it. A small glass vial that had rolled into the gap between furniture and wall. She pulled it out, and even in the dim light, she could see the residue clinging to the inside. Her hands trembled as she uncorked it and sniffed. Nothing. But she knew. The same way she'd known Fridolf was sick with something unnatural, she knew this was the source. She ran back to Aldrich's chambers, the vial clutched in her fist. He was awake now, standing over Fridolf with such raw despair on his face that Lucia almost couldn't bear it. "Your Majesty," she held out the vial. "I found this in Lady Flora's chambers." His eyes met hers, and something fierce and terrible flashed through them. He took the vial, and she watched his jaw clench as he caught the scent. "She did this," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "She poisoned my son." "I think I know what it is." Lucia's words tumbled out in a rush. "My mother, she's a healer in the Northern Pack. She specialized in rare poisons. I've seen symptoms like this before. If I'm right, she might have information, something that could help." Aldrich's gaze sharpened. "How far is the Northern Pack?" 2 days' hard ride, maybe less if. "Go." He moved to his desk, scrawling something on parchment. "Take this, my seal. Anything you need, anyone who stands in your way, show them this." "But Fridolf's will still be here when you return." His voice cracked on the words. "Go, Lucia, please. You're the only chance he has." Lucia took the parchment, her fingers brushing his. For a moment, their eyes met, and she saw everything he couldn't say. The fear, the desperate hope, the trust he was placing in a lowly Omega maid. "I'll bring back a cure," she promised. "I swear it." She kissed Fridolf's burning forehead and ran. The shift took her before she reached the palace gates. Her wolf surged forward, powerful and desperate, and Lucia didn't fight it. She needed the speed, the strength, the primal drive that would push her beyond exhaustion. She ran through the night, her paws eating up ground, her breath coming in rhythmic clouds. By dawn, she'd covered what should have taken half a day. She didn't stop, couldn't stop. Behind her, a little boy was dying. The Northern Pack's territory was as familiar as her own heartbeat. She reached her mother's cottage by midday of the second day, her body screaming with fatigue, her paws bloody. She shifted back and stumbled through the door. Lucia, her mother Marin, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, dropped the herbs she'd been grinding. "God's child, what's happened?" "Shadow Veil," Lucia gasped. "A child has been poisoned with Shadow Veil. I need to know how to cure it." Marin's face went pale. "There is no cure, you know that." "There has to be something," Anything, please, mother. Marin stared at her daughter for a long moment, then moved to a locked chest in the corner. She pulled out a bundle of ancient scrolls, yellowed with age, covered in script so old Lucia could barely read it. There is one way, Marin said slowly, but it's not a cure, it's a transference. What does that mean? A golden wolf, one blessed by the moon goddess, can pour part of their essence into the poisoned one. Their life force can burn out the toxin, purge it from the blood, but it comes at a cost. She looked at Lucia with terrible understanding. The golden wolf sacrifices part of themselves, their strength, their years, their very life. They'll survive, but they'll never be whole again. Lucia's throat tightened. And if there's no golden wolf? Then the child dies. Marin's voice was gentle but final. Golden wolves are myth, Lucia. I've never seen one in all my years. The last confirmed sighting was over a century ago. How is it done? Lucia. How is it done? Marin's hands shook as she unrolled a specific scroll, covered in strange symbols and ancient words. Under the full moon, the golden wolf shifts and channels their essence while these incantations are spoken. But without a golden wolf, this is useless. Lucia took the scroll, memorizing every word, every symbol. When is the next full moon? 3 nights from now. 3 nights. Fridolf might not have 3 nights. Lucia rolled the scroll carefully and tucked it into her shirt. Thank you, mother. Lucia, wait. Even if by some miracle you find a golden wolf, this ritual could kill them. The cost is worth it. Lucia kissed her mother's cheek. I have to go. She shifted before her mother could protest, her wolf bursting forth, golden as summer wheat, radiant as dawn, undeniable as truth. Marin's gasp followed her into the forest. Lucia ran harder than she'd ever run in her life. The scroll pressed against her chest, the incantations already burning themselves into her memory. She didn't let herself think about what came next, didn't let herself calculate the cost. A little boy was dying, and she was the only one who could save him. Chapter 7. The Golden Wolf. Lucia arrived at the palace as the sun began its descent on the second day, her wolf form streaking through the gates like golden fire. Guards startled, weapons half-drawn, but she shifted mid-stride and stumbled forward on human legs, the scroll clutched against her chest. The king, she gasped. I need to see the king. They brought her to the council chamber where Aldrich stood before his advisors, his face carved from stone and exhaustion. He looked up as she entered, and something like hope flickered in his dead eyes. Lucia. She crossed the room, her legs shaking, and placed the scroll on the table. There's a way, one way, but it requires, she swallowed hard, a golden wolf. The council erupted. Elder Torin leaned forward, squinting at the ancient script. Golden wolves are legend. They haven't existed for. I know what the legends say. Aldrich's voice cut through the noise. His eyes never left Lucia's face. What does the ritual require? The full moon, 3 nights from now. The golden wolf must shift and channel their essence into the poisoned one while these incantations are spoken. Her voice steadied as she recited what her mother had told her. The wolf's life force will burn out the toxin, purge it completely. And the cost? Aldrich asked quietly. Part of themselves, their strength, their years, they'll survive, but she couldn't finish. But they'll never be whole again, Aldrich completed, his jaw tight. Silence fell over the chamber like snow. Then we must find one. Elder Torin stood, his voice taking on the command of a man used to solving impossible problems. Send riders to every pack. Search the records. Someone must know of a golden wolf or know someone who does. There isn't time, another councilman protested. 3 days. Even if one exists, we'd never locate them, convince them, bring them here. Then we offer a reward. Aldrich's hands pressed flat against the table. Land, gold, title, anything, everything. Whoever brings me a golden wolf willing to save my son can name their price. The room buzzed with urgent planning. Maps were unrolled. Messengers were summoned. Debate raged about which territories to search first, which packs might harbor such a creature. Lucia stood apart from it all, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd known this moment would come, had known it since she left her mother's cottage, but knowing and doing were different beasts entirely. She was Omega, invisible, the maid who cleaned chambers and changed linens and disappeared into the background of palace life. Coming forward now meant stepping into light so bright it would expose everything she'd spent years hiding. But Fridolf was dying. "I have a golden wolf." The words came out barely above a whisper, but the room went silent as if she'd shouted. Every head turned toward her. Aldrich stared. "What?" Lucia's hands trembled. She clasped them together to stop the shaking. "I have a golden wolf inside me. It's mine." Elder Torin's expression cycled through disbelief, suspicion, shock. "That's impossible. You're a maid, an Omega, we would have known." "I never shifted in front of anyone." Her voice grew stronger, fueled by desperate truth. "I made excuses during pack runs, avoided gatherings. I didn't want anyone to know." "Why?" The question came from Aldrich, soft and confused. "Because golden wolves are legend, myth, marked by the moon goddess." Lucia met his gaze, willing him to understand. "I didn't want to be special. I wanted to be invisible, safe, normal." "Prove it," Elder Torin demanded. "Shift now." "The ritual requires the full moon." "I don't care about the ritual. If you're lying, if this is some desperate attempt at—" "She's not lying." Aldrich's voice was quiet but absolute. He moved around the table, stopping directly in front of Lucia. "Are you?" "No, Your Majesty." "Then shift, please, let them see." Lucia closed her eyes. The shift had always been easy for her, too easy, which was part of why she'd hidden it. Her wolf was powerful, eager, barely contained beneath her skin. She'd spent years suppressing it, pushing it down, teaching it to stay quiet. Now she let it free. The transformation rippled through her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Bones reshaped, muscles reformed, and where a small Omega woman had stood, a golden wolf now sat, massive, radiant, her fur gleaming like molten metal in the candlelight. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Someone's chair clattered backward. Elder Torin's mouth hung open, words dying on his tongue. Aldrich dropped to his knees in front of her, his hand reaching out slowly. When his fingers touched her fur, his breath caught. "Blessed moon goddess," he whispered. "All this time." Lucia shifted back, her clothes reforming around her through the magic that allowed modesty in transformation. She stood trembling, naked in a different way now, every secret exposed, every protection stripped away. "The full moon rises in 3 nights," she said. "I'll save him, I promise." The days between felt like years. Fridolf continued to fade, his small body growing lighter in Aldrich's arms, his breathing more labored. Lucia sat with him when she could, humming songs, telling stories, memorizing the shape of his face in case the ritual failed. In case she didn't survive it. Her mother had been clear, the cost was steep. Some golden wolves never recovered, some died in the attempt. But when Lucia looked at Fridolf, at this child who'd smiled in her arms, who'd called for her in his delirium, who'd never asked to be born into a world that would try to poison him, the choice was already made. The night of the full moon, they carried Fridolf to the palace clearing. The entire court gathered, silent and solemn. The scroll was unrolled, the ancient incantations prepared. Aldrich laid his son on the grass, and Fridolf's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Papa." "I'm here, little one. Lucia's here too. She's going to help you." Lucia stepped forward as the moon crested the tree line, full and silver and merciless in its beauty. She looked at Aldrich one last time, saw the desperate hope and terrible fear warring in his expression. Then she shifted. Her golden wolf emerged, larger than before, glowing beneath the moonlight like a creature from myth-given flesh. The court murmured prayers. Someone wept. The healer began the incantations, words older than memory, syllables that tasted of power and sacrifice. Lucia moved to Fridolf's still form and lowered her massive head, pressing her muzzle to his small chest. She felt it immediately, the poison, dark and writhing in his blood. and she felt her own essence, bright and burning, responding to her will. Take it, she thought. Take whatever you need, just live. The transfer was agony. Her life force poured out like water from a cracked vessel, flowing into Fridolf, seeking out the poison, burning it away cell by cell. She felt herself dimming, felt pieces of herself tearing loose and embedding in the boy's soul. The world tilted. Her legs trembled. Just a little more. Hold on. The poison fought back, writhing and resistant, but her essence was relentless. It flooded through Fridolf's small body, purging, cleansing, destroying everything that didn't belong. And then it was done. Lucia collapsed, her golden form hitting the grass hard. Distantly, she heard Aldrich shout her name. But Fridolf sat up. Chapter 8, A Different Reward. Fridolf sat up, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks, his cheeks flushed with healthy color instead of fever. He looked around, confused but whole, and his gaze landed on the massive golden wolf collapsed in the grass. Lucia. The word was small, questioning, but it pierced through Aldrich's shock. He rushed to his son, pulling him into his arms, running hands over his face, his arms, checking for any sign of illness. Fridolf felt warm but not burning, strong but not trembling. Alive. Papa, what happened? Why is everyone? Fridolf's eyes went wide. Lucia. He scrambled out of Aldrich's grip and stumbled toward the golden wolf, dropping to his knees beside her still form. Lucia, wake up. Please wake up. Aldrich's heart clenched. He moved to Lucia's side, pressing his hand to her chest. A heartbeat, faint but steady. Relief nearly drove him to his knees. She's alive, he said, his voice rough. She's just exhausted. Will she be okay? Fridolf's small hands stroked her golden fur, tears streaming down his face. She saved me, didn't she? Yes, Aldrich gathered both of them, his son and the woman who'd given everything to save him. Yes, she saved you. Guards brought blankets, and Aldrich wrapped Lucia's shifted form carefully before lifting her. She was lighter than she should have been, as if part of her substance had truly poured into Fridolf. He carried her to the palace, Fridolf trailing behind, refusing to be separated. They laid her in one of the finest guest chambers, not the servants' quarters. Aldrich dismissed everyone except the healer, and then he sent the healer away too. He pulled a chair beside the bed and settled in to wait. Fridolf climbed up beside Lucia's human form. She'd shifted back sometime during the night, her body's instinct seeking the shape that required less energy. The boy curled against her side, his head on her shoulder, one small hand clutching hers. Don't leave, he whispered. Please don't leave. Aldrich watched them through the long night, watched the way Fridolf's breathing synced with Lucia's, watched color slowly return to her face, and he thought about everything he'd missed, everything he'd been too blind to see. She'd been there all along, the answer to his promise, the mother his son needed, not titled or trained or politically advantageous, just loving, just present, just right. Dawn broke through the windows, painting everything gold. Lucia's eyes fluttered open. Fridolf, she breathed, her voice hoarse. I'm here. The boy's face lit up like sunrise. You're awake, you saved me. Of course I did. She managed a weak smile, her hand tightening around his. I promised, didn't I? Fridolf burst into tears and buried his face in her neck. Lucia held him, her own tears slipping silently down her temples, and met Aldrich's gaze over the boy's head. Thank you, Aldrich said, the words utterly inadequate. I can never. You don't have to. Her voice was soft but certain. I'd do it again, 1,000 times. Fridolf refused to leave her side for the next 3 days. He ate his meals in her room, napped curled against her, chattered endlessly about everything he'd missed while he was sick. Lucia listened with infinite patience, her strength gradually returning, though Aldrich noticed she tired more easily now. The sacrifice had left its mark. On the 3rd day, when Lucia could walk without swaying and Fridolf had finally been coaxed to the gardens to play, Aldrich summoned her to his chambers. She came dressed in a simple maid's uniform, her hair braided, her expression cautiously neutral. When she entered, she curtsied, a gesture that made Aldrich's chest tighten uncomfortably. "Please sit." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Lucia sat, her hands folded in her lap, her posture perfect. She looked small in the large room, surrounded by the trappings of power and wealth that had nothing to do with who she was. Aldrich had rehearsed this, planned what he would say, but now, looking at her, the words felt wrong. He pushed a heavy leather purse across the desk. 10,000 copper coins, more than enough to buy land, start a business, live comfortably for the rest of your life. He paused. "I promised a great reward to whoever saved my son. This is yours." Lucia stared at the purse like it might bite her. "Your Majesty, You're free, Lucia. You can go anywhere, do anything, no longer bound to service here." His voice caught despite his efforts to keep it steady. "You've given enough." Her eyes lifted to his, shining with unshed tears. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know. I did it because I love him." The words broke on a sob. "Because when I held him as a baby, when he smiled at me, when he called for me, I couldn't not save him. He's part of me now. Literally. I feel him like a second heartbeat." "Lucia. So thank you for the coins, and thank you for my freedom, but I can't take them, not if it means leaving." She wiped roughly at her tears. "I know I'm just a maid. I know I have no right to ask, but please don't send me away from him." Aldrich stood, moving around the desk. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. They were rough from work, scarred from service, and utterly precious. "I'm not sending you away." His throat felt tight. "I'm asking you to stay, not as a maid, never as a maid again." Her breath caught. "What?" "Fridolf needs you. More than that, he chose you. Before I ever considered taking a mate, before any of this happened, he chose you. His instincts recognized what I was too foolish to see." Aldrich's thumbs brushed over her knuckles. "Keep the coins. They're yours regardless, but stay. Be what you've already been to him. Be his mother." "His mother," Lucia repeated, the words trembling. "Not a caretaker, not a servant. His mother in title and in truth." Aldrich's voice dropped to something raw and honest. "You gave him part of your soul. Let me give you the position that honors that sacrifice." Lucia's tears fell freely now. "The court will never accept." "The court saw you transform into a golden wolf blessed by the moon goddess herself. They watched you save the heir to the throne. Anyone who objects can take it up with me." His grip tightened. "Will you stay?" She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I could never leave him," she whispered. "Even if you'd ordered me to go, I don't think I could have. He has part of me now, the most important part." Then it settled. A knock sounded at the door. Before Aldrich could answer, it burst open and Fridolf ran in, his face alight with joy. "Papa, Lucia, come see. The gardens have butterflies," and he stopped, looking between them. "Why is everyone crying?" Lucia laughed, watery and bright, and opened her arms. Fridolf launched himself into them, and she held him tight, her eyes closing in something that looked like prayer. "Happy tears, sweet one," she murmured into his hair. "Just happy tears." Aldrich watched them, and for the first time since his mate had died, the hollow ache in his chest eased. His son was whole, and the woman who'd made that possible was staying. Everything else could wait. Chapter 9. The trap is set. 6 months transformed the palace in ways both visible and hidden. Fridolf grew stronger, taller, his laughter echoing through corridors that had been silent with grief. He followed Lucia everywhere, calling her Mama with such natural ease that even the most skeptical courtiers stopped questioning it. Lucia bloomed too, though the sacrifice had left permanent marks. She tired more easily, her stamina diminished, and sometimes Aldrich caught her pressing a hand to her chest as if checking that her heart still beat properly. But when she smiled at Fridolf, when she held him close, she looked more whole than wounded. The court adapted. What choice did they have? A golden wolf blessed by the moon goddess had saved their prince. Elder Torin himself declared it divine providence. The council members who'd once dismissed her as a mere maid now bowed when she passed. But Aldrich hadn't forgotten Flora. The poison bottle sat locked in his private chambers, evidence he couldn't yet use. Every night he stared at it and imagined her face when she'd slipped poison into his son's food. Every night, rage burned fresh. He wanted justice, but more than that, he wanted her to know she'd failed. So he waited, planned, and when 6 months had passed, long enough for Flora to believe her crime had succeeded, he began writing letters. The first arrived at Flora's family estate on a cold morning, sealed with the royal crest. She opened it with trembling fingers, her heart in her throat. Lady Flora, it is with a heavy heart that I write to you. My son, Prince Fridolf, has passed from this world. The illness that plagued him proved too strong, and despite every effort, he slipped away in the night. I find myself alone now, with only grief as companion. The palace feels empty. My duties feel hollow. I confess I don't know what I need, but I think of you and remember the comfort of your presence and wonder if perhaps. Forgive me, I should not burden you with my sorrow. Aldrich. Flora read it 3 times, her pulse racing faster with each pass. The boy was dead. Dead. The poison had worked, and Aldrich, broken, grieving, desperate Aldrich, was reaching out to her. She penned a response dripping with sympathy and subtle availability. His next letter came within days, more vulnerable than the last. Then another. And another. Each one revealing a man shattered by loss, seeking solace, needing someone to help him bear the weight of the crown. Gifts arrived with the letters. Silk scarves in her favorite colors, a necklace of sapphires that matched her eyes, books on pack law with handwritten notes in the margins. I thought of you when I read this passage. Flora showed them to Celeste, who smiled like a cat with cream. He's yours. The boy is gone, and you're all he has left. I should seem reluctant, Flora mused, fingering the sapphire necklace. Grieving with him, not too eager. Just eager enough. Celeste poured wine, raising her glass. To the future Luna, long may she reign. 3 weeks before the planned ceremony, Aldrich's letter was direct. Marry me. I cannot bear this alone anymore. Be my Luna. Help me rebuild what grief has destroyed. Flora's acceptance was written within the hour. The day of her arrival, Flora dressed in midnight blue silk that hugged every curve, her copper hair arranged in intricate braids threaded with silver. She looked like royalty already, felt like it too. Her parents accompanied her, beaming with pride. The alliance would be formalized. Their daughter would be Luna. All the trade routes, all the political advantages they dreamed of, finally realized. The palace rose before them, grand and imposing, and Flora's heart soared. This was hers now, all of it. Aldrich met her in the courtyard, and she was struck by how truly haggard he looked. Grief had carved lines into his face, shadowed his eyes. Good. A broken man was easier to control than a whole one. Lady Flora, he took her hand, pressing it to his lips. You came. Of course. She let sympathy flood her voice. I'm so sorry for your loss, Your Majesty. I know how much Prince Fridolf meant to you. Something flickered in his eyes, too quick to identify. Yes, he meant everything. The wedding preparations unfolded with flawless precision. The grand hall was decorated in white and gold, flowers covering every surface, their scent almost overwhelming. Guests filled the pews, nobility from surrounding packs, council members, merchants, soldiers, everyone who mattered. Flora was escorted to a private chamber to prepare. Handmaids fussed over her dress, her hair, her jewelry. She caught her reflection in the mirror and smiled. Perfect. She looked absolutely perfect. When the doors opened and she processed down the aisle, every eye turned to her. Whispers of admiration followed her steps. At the end of the aisle, Aldrich waited in formal regalia, his expression unreadable. The ceremony began. Traditional vows were spoken, oaths given. Flora's heart raced with triumph. She was moments away from becoming Luna, from securing her position forever. The officiant raised his hands. And now, by the power vested in me by the moon goddess and this noble pack, I prepare to crown our new Luna. Wait! Aldrich's voice cut through the ritual like a blade. The officiant froze. Flora's smile faltered. Your Majesty. Aldrich turned to her, and for the first time she saw what lurked behind his grief-stricken facade. Cold, calculated, furious. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear, his words for her alone. "I have a surprise for you." Ice flooded Flora's veins. Something was wrong, terribly, impossibly wrong. Aldrich gestured to the doors at the back of the hall. They swung open. And Lucia walked through. She wore a gown of silver and white that caught the light like starshine, her hair loose and flowing, a circlet of delicate flowers crowning her head. Beautiful, radiant, alive. But that wasn't what stopped Flora's heart. It was the small hand clutched in Lucia's. The dark-haired boy walking beside her, healthy and whole and very much not dead. Fridolf's. The hall erupted in murmurs. Flora couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This was impossible. The poison, she'd watched him drink it. The letters said he'd died. Aldrich had told her. "Prince Fridolf," Aldrich announced, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. "Alive and well, thanks to the woman at his side." Lucia and Fridolf walked down the aisle, and with each step, Flora felt her world crumbling. The boy looked directly at her, and his expression was knowing. Too knowing for a child. He remembered. Aldrich's hand closed around Flora's wrist, gentle but inescapable. "You seem surprised, Lady Flora. Did you expect something different?" Her mouth opened, closed, no words came. "Perhaps," Aldrich continued, his voice still soft, still devastatingly polite. "You thought the poison would work." The hall went deathly silent. Flora's legs nearly buckled. She tried to pull away, but Aldrich's grip tightened. "Your Majesty, I don't know what you're—" "Don't." The single word was arctic. He released her wrist and pulled something from his coat, a small glass vial nearly empty, catching the light. Flora's vision blurred. That was hers, the poison bottle. She'd left it, she'd forgotten. "Your scent is all over this," Aldrich said. "And the poison inside matches what nearly killed my son. The healers confirmed it. Shadowvale, rare, deadly, untreatable." He turned to the assembly, holding the vial high. "Lady Flora poisoned Prince Fridolf. She slipped Shadowvale into his food, intending to murder the heir to secure her own position." Gasps, shouts. Flora's parents stood abruptly, their faces white with shock and horror. I never," Flora's voice cracked. "This is madness, I would never." "Mama," Fridolf's small voice cut through the chaos. He stepped forward, his dark eyes solemn. "She gave me the honey cakes, the ones that made me sick." The boy's testimony, innocent and damning, sealed her fate. Guards moved forward, their hands closing on Flora's arms. She thrashed, desperate. "No, this is a mistake, Aldrich, please." But Aldrich had already turned away from her. He walked to Lucia, taking her hand in his, and faced the assembly. "This," he said, his voice ringing clear, "is the woman who saved my son's life." Chapter 10, The True Luna. Flora screamed as the guards dragged her backward, her carefully arranged hair coming loose, her perfect dress twisting around her legs. "This is a lie, a conspiracy. I've been framed." "The evidence speaks clearly enough." Elder Torrens stood, his weathered face hard as granite. "The bottle bears your scent. The prince himself identifies you, and your absence during his illness, returning only when you believed him dead, shows consciousness of guilt." Flora's father surged to his feet. "My daughter would never." "Your daughter is a murderer." Aldrich's voice was flat, final. "And you will both answer for this crime." More guards moved forward, surrounding Flora's parents. Her mother had gone pale as parchment, her lips trembling. Her father's bluster died as he saw the cold certainty in Aldrich's eyes. "The penalty for attempted murder of the heir is death," Aldrich continued. "But I am not without mercy. You will be exiled, all three of you. Your lands forfeit, your titles stripped. You will leave this territory and never return. If you're found within our borders again, the sentence will be carried out in full." It was more than Flora deserved, and everyone in the hall knew it. But Aldrich had no desire to start his new beginning with executions. Let them live with their failure. Let them rot in exile, stripped of everything they'd schemed to gain. "Take them away." Flora's shrieks echoed through the hall as the guards hauled her toward the side exit. She twisted, trying to look back at Aldrich, her face contorted with rage and desperation. "You'll regret this. You're making a mistake. She's nothing, nothing." The doors slammed shut, cutting off her voice. Silence descended, thick and uncertain. The assembled guests shifted in their seats, confused about what came next. They'd come for a wedding, witnessed a trial, and now. Aldrich still held Lucia's hand. She stood frozen beside him, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock at everything that had just unfolded. Fridolf pressed against her side, his small fingers tangled in her skirts. "Forgive me," Aldrich said to the assembly, his voice gentler now. "I used deception to bring Flora here to ensure justice was served, but the deception ends now." He turned to Lucia, and his expression softened into something raw and honest. "What comes next is the truth." He addressed the crowd, still holding Lucia's hand. "6 months ago, my son lay dying, poisoned by the woman who sought to become Luna. Every healer in the realm tried and failed to save him. We discovered the cure required a golden wolf, a creature of legend, blessed by the moon goddess herself." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Those who'd been present for the ritual sat straighter, remembering. Those who'd only heard whispers leaned forward, hungry for confirmation. This woman, Lucia of the Northern Pack, revealed herself as that golden wolf. She performed the ancient ritual under the full moon, sacrificing part of her own life force to purge the poison from my son's blood. Aldrich's voice roughened with emotion. She saved him when no one else could, and in doing so, she proved herself worthy of far more than gratitude. Elder Torin rose again, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I was there. I witnessed her transformation. A golden wolf, radiant as the sun, blessed beyond question by the moon goddess. The ritual was successful because she was chosen for it." Other council members stood, adding their voices. "She has cared for the prince since she arrived at this palace. The boy thrives under her guidance. She asks for nothing and gives everything." One by one, they vouched for her, not because Aldrich commanded it, but because they'd seen the truth with their own eyes. Lucia had been invisible for so long, but her actions had made her impossible to ignore. An elderly council member, the pack's spiritual advisor, stepped forward. His voice trembled with reverence. "A golden wolf has not walked among us for over a century. Their appearance is a sign, a blessing, a mark of divine favor. To have one reveal herself to save our prince." He bowed his head. "The moon goddess has spoken. We would be fools to ignore her message." The weight of his words settled over the assembly like a benediction. Aldrich felt Lucia trembling beside him. He squeezed her hand gently, drawing her gaze to his. "I brought you here under false pretenses," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "I should have asked first, but I wanted the pack to see what I see, to understand what you've done, what you are. You're not just anything." He lifted her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart hammered. "You saved my son, you became his mother, and now, if you'll allow it, I want the world to know that truth." Tears slipped down Lucia's cheeks. "The pack will never." "The pack has already accepted you. Look at them." She turned, scanning the faces of the assembled nobles and commoners alike, and saw not rejection, not disdain, but awe, respect. In some faces, even joy. Fridolf tugged on her dress. "Mama, are you sad?" "No, sweet one." She knelt, pulling him into her arms. "Not sad, never sad." Aldrich gestured to an attendant, who approached bearing a cushion. Upon it rested a crown, delicate silver worked into the shape of crescent moons and stars, embedded with stones that caught the light like captured moonbeams. The crown meant for Luna. Aldrich lifted it carefully, then looked at Lucia. She'd stood again, Fridolf still clinging to her hand, her face luminous with tears and hope and fear all mixed together. "You've already been his mother in every way that matters," Aldrich said, his voice carrying through the hushed hall. "You've already sacrificed more than anyone has the right to ask. You've already proven yourself worthy 1,000 times over." He paused, letting the crown catch the light. "But I want to make it official. I want the pack to know. I want the world to know." He held her gaze, putting all his sincerity, all his gratitude, all his respect into that look. Lucia of the Northern Pack, golden wolf blessed by the moon goddess, savior of my son and treasure of this realm, will you accept the title of Luna? Not as my mate, but as mother to the prince and honored member of this court. The distinction was important. He wasn't asking her to marry him, to replace his lost mate, to be something she wasn't ready for. He was asking her to be what she already was, Fridolf's mother, formalized and honored. Lucia's voice came out choked but clear. Yes, I accept. The hall erupted in applause. Aldrich stepped forward and placed the crown gently on her head. It settled there as if it had been made for her, the silver gleaming against her dark hair, the stones catching tears and transforming them into light. I present to you, Aldrich announced, turning to face the assembly with Lucia at his side and Fridolf between them, Luna Lucia, mother to Prince Fridolf, blessed of the moon goddess, protector of this realm. The applause grew deafening. People stood, cheering, some openly weeping. Elder Torin bowed deeply. The spiritual advisor dropped to one knee. And Fridolf, oblivious to protocol and propriety, threw his arms around both Aldrich and Lucia, laughing with pure, uncomplicated joy. Mama's a queen now, he announced proudly. Lucia laughed through her tears, holding her son close. And when she met Aldrich's eyes over Fridolf's head, the gratitude there was so profound it stole his breath. Thank you, she mouthed. Aldrich shook his head. The thanks belonged to her, for saving Fridolf, for staying, for being exactly who she was when everyone needed her most. The Omega maid who became Luna. The invisible girl who transformed into legend. The golden wolf who saved a prince and won a kingdom's heart. Not through ambition or manipulation or political maneuvering, but through love. Simple, sacrificial, world-changing love.